What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod, giving you another week of what's going on in pop culture. My name is Pat Sheehan, joined by my trusty co-host Dave Martin Swagger. Dave, how you doing, man?
Doing good. Wonder Woman coming to our TV screens this Christmas Day. HBO Max. Pat, how do you feel about another blockbuster being cut off at the theatrical level?
I feel sad, man. It's starting to become winter up here. Sun's going down really early. Looking outside at outside a dark window as we speak.
It's good
It's
for my
only
green screen.
it is good for the green screen. Looks great behind you, but it's a little depressing this time of year, especially as we go towards the holidays. People are being encouraged not to see their families on the holidays for safety reasons, and just the rising COVID numbers. I think you really just start to reflect on just how shitty this year has been. And this pales in comparison to like the real world cost of things, but we are a culture podcast, so we're going to talk about culture. And not being able to see movies like Wonder Woman 1984 in theaters. Technically, I guess you still could if you can find a theater that's open, but nowhere near me will be. So I'm definitely going to see it on the small screen. I'm probably going to see a lot of these movies. We saw Mulan already on the small screen, taken away from the big screen. Christopher Nolan's most recent movie is going to be video on demand. That's the way I'm going to be seeing that, which is just totally not how you want to see a Christopher Nolan movie the first time.
You, as someone who saw it in theaters, that is correct.
So I feel sad, but also I guess grateful that we're getting some of these movies to us early. I don't know, a real mix of emotion. How are you feeling about it, though?
Yeah, I mean, now at this point, I just think about the long-term health of the theatrical business, of course, which we've talked about before, and also when studios will be comfortable putting stuff back in theaters again once theaters are comfortable being open again. It's two sides of the coin. But Wonder Woman at least makes a little bit of sense because it's being used to push HBO Max, which has obviously been a kind of a funny, confounding launch to most people due to the delineation between old school HBO premium cable and now a pay traditional streaming service version. It's all the same. It all costs the same, but a lot of people still don't have HBO Max. They might just have normal HBO through their cable. So it's like making people understand what HBO Max is because they're going to want to see Wonder Woman 1984 probably makes sense. And you'd hope is worth the large box office losses that this will cause.
Yeah, that's a good point. Something I hadn't thought about too much, but it's it's the sort of thing where at the same like at one point seeing it early is definitely, it makes sense for HBO Max. But on the other hand, it's like, man, I feel like HBO has so much that other places don't have, like the quality of there. I mean, I am fortunate enough to have an HBO Max subscription, and I was just flipping through all the classic movies they have, all the Cartoon Network stuff, all the Adult Swim stuff. That having that like right at your fingertips, I feel like they already have a lot. But yeah, certainly, I guess bringing these new big name things definitely ups that profile. But I agree, like the long term health of movie theaters is starting to become more and more worrisome. I just the other day got an email from the AMC Stubbs A list that said, you can push back your decision another couple of months because they just ain't going to be opening near me anytime soon. So it doesn't make sense
anyway. So.
Right. So if anyone had to make that decision, of course they're not going to re-up. It's very, very concerning. I don't know. This is a kind of a bummer way to start off the podcast. I feel like maybe we should move on to something else. Any last thoughts on this?
Well, at least we get to see it. It's not delayed endlessly. It's not pushed back a full year to say next this coming June. It's supposed to come out June 2020. So at least there's that, something to talk about and see.
Give me more Chris Pine and less Chris Pratt.
Oh yeah,
but give me more Mando, because we're talking Baby Yoda and the Mandalorian this past week, and actually not that much of Baby Yoda or the Mandalorian in this past week's episode, where they team back up with our good friend LeVar back in what's the name of the planet again?
Navarro.
Navarro, that's right.
Mhm.
Which I should remember because of Dave Navarro, classic guitarist for a lot of bands back in the 80s and 90s. But um, really, I think this episode seemed to be setting up for things outside of the Mandalorian. Would you agree?
Yeah, yeah, that's sure. You're getting the last 2 weeks we've got a lot of plot movement as opposed to the more episodic vibe we've had with a lot of the Mandalorian to that point.
Yeah, and I think especially in this one where you have a lot of, well, first of all, directed by Carl Weathers this episode, which uh is great. And I'm sorry, I said LeVar Burton when I meant Carl Weathers. That was a mistake on my part. But I think really, I mean, a couple of really cool moments in the last couple of episodes, but this seemed to be setting up a very interesting idea of what if this was a I don't know, Gina Carano type show or something like that.
Hmm.
What if this was a uh, Carl Weathers spin-off type show, or what if it was just following them around that world in general? And I think it seems pretty much like they're like, hey, get ready for this because this is coming.
Yeah, sure, sure. I mean, I think the bet right now is that it'll be around the assumed Rosario Dawson Ahsoka Tano character, um, perhaps with Dave Filoni's involvement spinning off from the Mandalorian. But there's has been talk of a Cara Dune Gina Carano spinoff as well. Um, Gina Carano's been a bit controversial online as of late. Who knows if that would actually factor into any decision making? Um, but yeah, I mean, this past week you kind of got like continuation of that season one thread. Like you could tell that that scientist guy had like Camino insignias, right? What they want with Baby Yoda. Now you know they were literally like testing stuff with his blood. You
Fusing his
saw
blood.
experiment stuff in those like tanks, pseudo like Snoke in Palpatine's lair in Rise of Skywalker, right? Um,
Hmm.
did we get some Purge troopers hanging out with Moff Gideon at the end of the episode? Getting a lot, and of course, all the Bo-Katan, Katie Sackhoff stuff a week
Yeah.
beforehand. So Mandalorian's kicking off in the high gear, and we know that Tamura Morrison's Boba Fett's lingering, and
Hmm.
Ahsoka, who's already been name dropped on the show. So it's just a matter of time.
Could you foresee the Mandalorian ever moving away from this Mandalorian and potentially not involving Pedro Pascal, especially because we mentioned how there's been some potential discord there between him and him on set, I guess I'll say.
Um, no, because I actually think we're setting up for Pedro Pascal to feel more part of the show because now we understand that his sect of Mandalorians were more
Extreme.
extreme and radical, and the whole not taking your helmet off thing is not actually the way. It's not normal, which is what fans of the cartoons were thinking this whole time. So we assume that would mean that eventually we get to see Pedro Pascal's face and he can act more, besides just physically and giving voice work.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't expect Baby Yoda nor Pedro Pascal's Din Djarin character to leave anytime soon.
When they meet up with Ahsoka, so you're not expecting Baby Yoda to be left with Ahsoka then?
Yeah, well, Baby Yoda will be around. Yeah, maybe Baby Yoda switches shows, but
Mhm.
I'm not
Baby
sure.
Yoda ain't going nowhere.
No,
That's
no way.
for sure. Dave, I want to jump real quick though to one more thing before we get into the actual docket we have for today, which is a Netflix movie that came out a couple weeks ago called The Holidate, starring your girl Emma Roberts.
Big fan
of Emma Roberts.
Yeah, she's good. Scream Queens,
was gonna
underrated
say.
Ryan Murphy production.
You love Scream Queens. Yeah, but this stars Emma Roberts, Luke Bracey, and a lot of other people you don't know, except for Kristen Chenoweth is in this. And I feel like the only movies I ever see her in now are just Christmas movies.
Mhm.
Maybe that's because I also just happened to catch part of Four Christmases, which she's also in, like right before I watched this. But very, it's funny. Like I think about Christmas movies in a very specific way. We talked about Last Christmas last year. Last Christmas we talked about it
Amelia
actually.
Clark.
And I would say that for production value is probably one of the upper tier Christmas movies. Now in terms of things you talk about with cultural impact, it's certainly not up there. But just in terms of how it looks pretty good. And I feel like Holiday falls very comfortably above Hallmark and Lifetime Christmas movies, which is a genre of trash TV all of its own, and then like right below those high production ones.
Hmm.
And it's actually kind of a good lane for it because on the one hand, I was watching and I was like, man, this is absolute shit. But on the other hand, I was like, this is also way more entertaining than those Lifetime ones. Like, this is actually a step up. It was literally the Alonzo Mourning gif happening in real time, like throughout the entire movie. And Emma Roberts, very charming. I think she has some good moments in this. Some of the writing in this is just really, really bad. Like literally, I mean, he was being crude on purpose, but literally a part where Luke Bracey's character Jackson says to Sloane, Emma Roberts,
Mhm.
"Your tits look really great in that dress." And I just was like, all right. Like, I mean, he's supposed to be just a crude dude, just in general. Both like kind of over like Christmas and romance and holidays. They just always go to each other's events on holidays, so they don't have to hear the story, the questioning from their families, so to speak.
Yeah.
But even that, I was like, I mean, there's just no coming back from a line like that. I feel like, but you know what? Overall, I'm gonna give it like a C minus. Like
Huh.
I've watched worse
Okay.
Christmas movies, and this is on the Christmas movie scale, not on the
Yeah.
actual movie scale.
I think Christmas movies at this kind of level, uh, minimal effort, obviously cheaply produced. It's
Mhm.
another emerging lane for Netflix to just
Totally.
make this big volume of these type of films to just have and keep people on Netflix around
All
this
the
time of
time.
year. It's
Yep.
pretty easy to see the playbook, but it's working.
Yeah, and I actually had the same thought when I was comparing it to those Lifetime movies because I was like, yeah, if they just get a stable of these, like, you put that shuffle button on if you're a middle-aged white mom, and why would you ever need Lifetime or Hallmark again? Especially if potentially they could end up getting those same movies made for what, like $1 million budget or something like that. It's like totally worth
Yeah.
the money for them.
I just wanted to follow up on the topic of Emma Roberts and poor films because there was this movie that came out 2 years ago that I've wanted to see. It is currently on Prime, and it had a brief release in 2018. It's called Little Italy. It was this critically panned like rom com with Emma Roberts and Hayden Christensen as the children of rival New York pizzeria owners that fall in love. Apparently, the movie's terrible, but I've always wanted to watch it just to support two of my kings and queens in Emma and Hayden. Haven't watched it yet though. Maybe I'll get to
Well,
it one day.
yeah, whenever you watch, please report back because Emma Roberts was actually not probably was definitely my favorite part of this whole thing. So, well, we can talk about her anytime on the podcast, but let's talk about Saint John next, which we never talked about him before on
Nope.
this. And I was like, why does Dave want to listen to Saint John? Why does he want to check out this album? And then I get to the end, and I know exactly why Dave wants to talk about this because he wants to talk about a song that came out 4 years ago, but was remixed last year and blew up on TikTok. Is that right, Dave?
That's correct. Roses, which if you listen to the original St. John song Roses from 2016, you'll hear a very different vibe from the worldwide hit everyone knows today. It's more of like a dance hall song, a much slower tempo, but that remix by Imanbek, a Kazakh DJ. I remember when the remix came out, I was like, is Imanbek like a EDM scene person I'm supposed to know? Am I like not up on Imanbek? No, he's pretty nascent apparently. So that was nice to feel. But yeah, you listen to that remix and like, wow, this is really pitched up. This is quite different, but I think it's a very effective remix.
Oh,
And you
totally.
understand why it became a TikTok hit because it is a very catchy beat.
Yes. Great. Perfect for TikTok just with that drop in general around the chorus. But yeah, the remix is fire. The original song and especially the future remix, I guess
Mhm.
it's on here. No bueno. And I think that's the thing, Dave, is you, to get to that last song, I had to listen to about 37 other minutes of music on this from St. John. And I'm wondering, was this a pleasurable 37 minutes before the remix for you?
Yeah, I think it's pretty middling. Like, and the reason I wanted to listen to this album It's not the first St. John album. He's 34. He's been working in the industry, albeit with a low profile, for a while.
Mhm.
And I wanted to see, like, will this album like do somewhat well for him, because TikTok does not often drive success to the artist so much as drive success to the individual song, and the song almost becomes removed from the artist and becomes owned by TikTok in a certain sense. You can look at this with a lot of recent TikTok hits where the trickle down isn't actually what you'd expect all the time when it comes to the music. And I want to see, like, does St. John, like, does he stick to what he's been doing? Does he try and change up and follow that remix blueprint and try and chase more success? And will it be successful? And we'll find that last part out later. But from what I gathered, it seems like he did not compromise who he was. But this kind of R&B and hip hop, light hip hop, is not super special. I don't think. Like, there's some moments I liked on this, but I think it's pretty forgettable. I think the best part about St. John would just kind of be his delivery. He does have a unique voice from time to time. He stands out, at least, but the songs themselves aren't often that special.
I think if anything, you can definitely see his profile has risen for sure.
Hmm.
I mean, you look at the features on "While the World Is Burning," and the first quarter of the album feels like a strict St. John album, and then it starts to kind of go in a bunch of different directions. You got Lil Uzi on this, A Boogie, the Baby, Kanye,
Hmm.
Jid. Like, there's a lot of Kalani. At the near the end, you have a lot of big name people on this album, which is usually a pretty good sign. Getting the co-sign from these people in some sense, or at least wanting to be associated
Hmm.
with him. I think they come on to varying degrees, and like you said, not all of it's very memorable. But I actually feel like the moments I remember most are the features. Like,
Hmm.
I really think Jid kills it. Jetty is. I really liked his verse, and I think just like as a distinctive, like it caught my ear while I was listening to this. Um, I thought the song with Lil Uzi, "High School Reunion Prom," was
That was
pretty
good.
effective, and it sounds really like whimsical and
Hmm.
cool. I don't know. I thought that one was great, and I even liked Kalani. Black Six Lack. I'm not always big fan of, but I thought Kalani sounded pretty nice. And, she always kind of brings it. So a
Yeah,
couple of good moments, but nothing that I think was super overwhelming.
yeah. High School Reunion Prom definitely stood out to me. I think that's probably his best performance, St.
Mhm.
John's. Um, that has a catchy kind of sad boy hook to it, but his verses are a little different tempo as well. And then Uzi, I think, has a really nice flow on that,
Mm.
and fits the vibe. Apparently, St. John actually does have a relationship with Kanye. This wasn't just like a mailed in feature from him. I would not be surprised to see St. John on a future Kanye project, to be honest, as like the muse of the week for Kanye at the time.
For whatever that will be worth by the time that happens. So,
Right.
uh, although I do have to say, if that turns out to be the case, we really did like 070 this year. So,
That's right.
if you can get that 070 bump, or at least that creative inspiration, maybe that'll work out. Any last thoughts about St. John before we move on?
Mm, I want to see how these sales do. I want, like, does TikTok drive a big week for him? I mean, St. John still, just really off of Roses, is a top 100 artist on Spotify right now in terms of monthly listeners. Will that translate to album sales? TBD.
TikTok, the power of TikTok. Let's jump to some people we were talking about last week on our Grammys pod, our Grammy nomination prediction pod, which is BTS. We were talking about how they might get some shine, some love, some recognition.
The time you're hearing this, you would likely already know if BTS gets nominated for best pop song, pop performance, something like that. Um, TBD. They're probably up against it in terms of getting that, but I would not be surprised because they have a ton of momentum, as
And
anyone with a pulse would know by this point.
and we've talked about BTS a couple of times on the pod. Map of the Soul. Earlier, was it this year when they
Yes,
dropped
Map of the
the
Soul 7 back in February, right before quarantine, actually.
crazy? Um, and I think we also talked about Persona the year before, if I'm
Yep.
recalling. So
Mhm.
there's a couple of things to go back and reference if you want to hear our earlier thoughts. But B, their newest album, uh, it was interesting. This album moved my opinion of them ever so slightly. I still think that they're a rocket ship, in terms of just potential and in terms of quality of pop music. They're definitely at the top, in my opinion, in the world, and the numbers will back that up. But um, this album felt more Jonas Brothery
Oh,
to me, which I didn't know if
wow.
that was such a good move. I think Dynamite is probably the song that solidifies that for me. I mean, that feels like it could have just been a Jonas Brothers song in a lot of ways, but
Mhm.
even the vibe throughout just was this more like toned back pop, R&B influenced sound that seemed a little bit more. I guess they're always in their feelings, but this felt a little bit more like I don't know, lover boyish than anything. Did you get that same sense, or am I off on
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, so you have Map of the Soul 7 was an hour long
that?
full length album. On that, you have still a wide range of music as their sound is wont to do, but you notably had the biggest song to date for them at the time on, which is a very anthemic K-pop song, kind of
Yes.
traditional but still really great. And that's just probably my favorite BTS song still. You don't get that anthemic song on B. If you listen to the guys do press on for this album, they'll say that the reason it even exists is because they had more downtime in 2020 due to the lack of touring. And I mean, that's an obvious thing to think about, but BTS normally are very, very busy people. They perform a lot, they are always working. And you look at the credits on this, the guys co-wrote almost all the songs. Their production credits. They're more hands-on than the typical K-pop star unit. Big Hit, their management did a lot of the early decision making. In most K-pop groups, the work is done in-house and not actually by the performers. So it seems like this is something BTS just kind of wanted to make, and is reflexive of how they've been feeling. And I think that sad boy but still optimistic sound does make sense for something coming out at the end of 2020, given the
Oh,
year
for
they've
sure.
had as well. And then at the end, of course, you have something that's kind of pure fun, pure pop, uh, and also a clear play at American audiences in
Mhm.
Dynamite, notably their first song, all in English, which also, of course, debuted at number one. It was a huge success for them. It changed how BTS performs in America as a result.
Mhm.
So what I wanted to see going in was, were they going to make an album that was all dynamite, very westernized? They didn't do that. I think you
Yeah.
get a lot of the stuff that they still like to do, where the sad boy stuff, right? Like, I think a lot of the songs on B are close to like Louder Than Bombs. On Map with Soul 7, more
Mhm.
um, understated. But I still find a lot of moments to like. Fly to My Room and Telepathy, I think, stood out to be the most among the new tracks. What about you?
Ye Yeah, I think I really like the first one, "Life Goes On," is probably my second favorite song to Dynamite. Um, you mentioned Telepathy too. I don't think any of the tracks are necessarily bad. That's the thing, is that this is still, like, really solid pop music, and the grooves and melodies on this are really
Mhm.
wonderful as well. I think I'm thinking about how Map of the Soul 7 started, right? And like intro persona is this like
Yeah.
huge rock guitar, like blaring song. It kind of like sets the tone for this expansive, album. And then this just feels so toned down. And I
Yeah.
think it just feels a little bit more like they were going for a more specific type view than maybe something earth shattering. But
Right. Definitely.
you can't knock them, because like you said, this is something that is more of a product of the time they're living in, more so than anything that was probably they've been planning for a long time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think Flat in My Room for me had a lot of those BTS trademarks to me. I think that chorus has a really nice rhythm to it. You have Jimin and Taeyoung like harmonizing really nice on that. And then later you get a really good rap verse from Suga as well, like the union of vocal pop and hip hop that we associate with K-pop, kind of textbook stuff right there on Flat in My Room. And then Telepathy, that production stood out to me. That's disco pop. You know, disco pop obviously very in vogue these days with Dua Lipa and friends. And that's what I thought of when I heard that one. I like that a lot. RM, I think I had a notable rap verse on that. But yeah, I agree. I think Map of the Soul 7's more of the sound I usually like from them because that's just kind of the K-pop I like more. But
Mhm.
I mean, the fact that we even got a second album from them this year is kind of a win to me. Like,
Totally.
so I'll take it. And like, I mean, when Dynamite came out in later in the summer, way after Map of the Soul 7, I was like, wait a minute, like BTS is gearing back up again. This is kind of crazy. Like, they just don't stop. Um,
They're a
and
machine, man, for sure.
yeah, well, and since we last talked about them, there was a really notable development, which was that Big Hit Entertainment uh, had an IPO, like the most anticipated public offering in South Korea in several years. And the management company that runs BTS and makes, I think, like 80% of their money from BTS, it's really just BTS, the company, was valued at $4 billion. And all the BTS guys got a lot of stock and became multimillionaires off that. And they're already very wealthy, but like, it was an interesting, I think, like business music industry development because the BTS army, the loyal stands of BTS that are Legion, because they are so loyal, they've almost been weaponized, and I think all the army would say knowingly and happily to like make the company and the band even more money, you know, because they're so invested in the success of this group that they're looking to buy shares in the band and driving the price up as a result. It's kind of interesting because it's uncommon. It's a new thing.
BTS the company. How do you think Nowstalgia the company would do on the Nasdaq?
I don't know if we're ready to be listed yet. You know,
We're
subscribe at youtube.com/nostalgia pod though if you'd like to make that happen.
a do it, and also check out the new Meg the Stallion album because she's dropping some good news for us. When she dropped this full length, really expansive, and I thought surprising album in a way. You know, so it's interesting, right? When we talk about Meg, it's hard to really it's I think it's hard to like talk about her without addressing some of the things that have been happening in her life leading up to this, right? So uh shit with Tory Lanez, that whole saga has been absurd and ridiculous and
Mhm.
kind of just like sad in some ways, the way that it's been covered and like the
Yeah,
victim blaming in a
the
lot of
initial
ways.
reaction was pretty terrible. The way people made light of it,
Yeah.
honestly. But I would say I think Megan definitely wrestled it back and put it to bed, frankly, right
Yeah.
away at the start of this album with Shots Fired. That honestly, when I heard that song started, I was like in a daze and barely heard what she said the first time because it was honestly revelatory to me to
Yeah.
hear her flip "Who Shot Ya"
Hmm.
by Biggie, and then flip the meaning of who shot you because she was the one who got shot, not Tupac, of course, right? And like to just pointedly just belittle Tory Lanez and put this whole thing to bed by making a song that's better than any song Tory Lanez has ever made. Like
Yeah.
it was fucking fire. I
Yeah.
fucking love it. It's so good.
Um, but she also, you know, just to kind of finish the preface, also dropped WAP, which gained a lot of attention. Was one of the hottest songs in the country for a while. I
Number one.
think probably one of the songs that this year will be most remembered for. Um, and you know, it got her talked about in some good ways and some not so good ways if you're Ben Shapiro. So you know, Sugar being the last album we heard, probably the last big album we heard pre-quarantine. You know, I
Yep.
mean,
Right
it's it,
before.
it's kind of crazy that now, just 8 months later, we're getting another Meg album. And Sugar, I think we felt like it was good but not great, and we were wondering if what Meg was going to have in store next. And it seems like good news. She came very inspired, pulling from a lot of past hip hop classics to really build
Mhm.
this album up.
Yeah, it's honestly hilarious to reflect back on early March, like the before times, uh, and think about Suga because when Suga came out, remember Meg was in the midst of major label issues with 1501, you know her,
Mhm.
her label, and Suga was an incomplete form and was able to be released due to court injunctions and whatnot. And uh, it didn't have a good first week's sales numbers. And then I think, to Megan fans, that might have been concerning, but I remember we were talking about that, right? And then just fast forward but a few weeks, and Savage becomes a major hit, taking off on TikTok,
Speaking
later
of
getting to
TikTok,
#1 after the Beyonce remix comes out. And then you have WAP come out even later in the summer, another song that goes to #1. You're like, oh wait, no, now Megan is certified. Uh,
fresh, yeah.
yeah,
She's a
like
G.
the money is there all of a sudden. Like it flipped like that. She's already famous and popular as of late 2018, but like just like that, she became like instant mainstream.
Mhm.
And that was kind of interesting. So I guess it makes sense to follow up that with another full length project, and she's billing this as her debut album, even if she's been a star for some time. It's kind of a funny distinction, as we've talked about before with people like Chance the Rapper. Uh, but yeah, I think Good News, it has all the hallmarks you want from good Megan Thee Stallion records.
Yeah, it's an absolute banger of a record, man. I mean, I think this is not only a step in the right direction for Meg, but I think this really ascends and solidifies her as one of the biggest rappers in the game right now.
Without question.
It's hard because we the easy thing to do is to compare her to Cardi, but I think for a lot of reasons, her and Cardi get thrown in the same conversations. It feels like she's ascended to potentially biggest female artist in the rap game. I don't know. She's at least up there, which is I
It,
think
it's her and Cardi right now. I think in terms of currency, they're both ahead of Nicki Minaj. Yeah.
for sure. So it just feels like this does so much for her, which is such a great thing. And maybe we should talk about the things it does and how it helped her up here. So as you mentioned, flipping "Who Shot You." It's the first song on the album, totally eviscerating Tory Lanez. What a way to start. Then, I mean, what other songs, what other moments really grab you on this album?
So when we think of like what is Megan Thee Stallion's hallmarks, I think part of that right away is what she does technically. From the jump with Shots Fired, this shit is straight flow. She has just impeccable flow the whole time, and that the best parts of Sugar, those first 4 tracks, Ain't Equal, Savage, Bitch, that was all good flow, right? It was when she wanted to sing a little bit and change it up later on in the EP that we're like, wait a minute, this is not nearly as good.
Mhm.
She basically throws that all away on Good News, with the exception, I think, Don't Rock Me to Sleep at the end, which I also think is a bit forgettable because she's trying to do like weird singing stuff. For the most part, it's all flow.
Yeah.
And she's just so good at it that like it always sounds good. And then you combine that with, I think, some great wordplay throughout the track list.
Mhm.
Like on what's new? Beat that pussy red, Sue Woo. Uh, on Sugar Baby, invest in this pussy boy, support black business. On Shots Fired, I told him you're not popping, you're just on the remix. That's a reference to Tory Lanez being on the Jack Harlow "What's Popping." And my favorite one on fuck, I forgot what song this was on. Pussy like a wild fox looking for a Sasuke. That's a Naruto reference. Like the wordplay is awesome the whole
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, flow. I mean, not only the way that she like mimics flows throughout this, but she just sounds so effortless and like
Mm-hmm.
just totally in command the whole record, which is really
Yeah,
impressive.
she never gets uh, you know, beaten by any of your guests. The guests all, for the most part, fit in with her, but it's always a Meg song.
Yeah, and you think about probably one of my favorite moments near the end, which is "Girls in the Hood,"
Mm-hmm.
taking "Boys in the Hood" from NWA and just totally taking Eazy-E's flow on that so seamlessly, and
Yeah,
it just sounds so fucking good. It's insane.
right. And the thing about Girls in the Hood, which had come out a few months ago, Boys in the Hood, a classic rap song, but notably quite misogynistic, like a lot of
Mhm.
NWA stuff. Girls in the Hood's flipping that once again because it's Meg being in control as a confident woman,
Mhm.
once again, like Shots Fired, flipping it around. And I think that's kind of been, I think, the overwhelming, takeaway with her lyrics ever since probably last year with the Fever mixtape is that Megan yes, she's raunchy about sex. She likes
Mhm.
rapping about sex. That's clear. Many a banger already out of that. But it's not just because she wants to be vulgar. It's because she is confident, and it's like about her independence, right? And like honestly, it's a really, I think it's a really revelatory like feminist point of view, right? And that's what makes WAP so great. It is the confidence, is the carefree nature that is all of that, right? And like even like City Girls, they kind of do the same stuff from time to
Mhm.
time as well. So Megan at this point, when putting to bed the Tory Lane stuff and just dropping a banger album that does all the things you want Megan Thee Stallion to do at this point, I think it just really as you said before, solidifies her as just a force to be reckoned with. And I really do not expect it to change anytime soon because she's sticking to what she's good at, and what she's good at lasts because again, it's flow, it is wordplay.
Yeah, I agree. I think her being unabashedly pro feminist, pro pretty much everything, like women's bodies, women's rights, those sorts of things, is a perfect way to kind of describe how she's taking control of her brand and what her music means. And it's really funny because as you were talking, I was like, well, Dave, some people might not really like that. And I was like, then I was just thinking about the people who don't. And it's like,
Don't listen to it then.
fuck those people, man. Like, they're just such losers. Um,
You made the comment about a Ben
Ben
Shapiro
Shapiro. I was about to do a bit. I was about to like do an impersonation, but I held back.
he went viral for deadpanning the WAP lyrics, obviously. But
Macaroni in a pot, boy.
well, I was just thinking, you remember he had some comments about Harry Styles and what Harry Styles was wearing on a photo shoot recently. And I was just thinking, this is not sequitur, obviously, but Harry Styles in a dress still makes Ben Shapiro's wife wetter than what we know Ben's wife gets for him, as he told
Uh,
us during the WAP reading.
well, Dave. Actually, my wife's a doctor, and it's actually not good for a woman to get wet during sex. So I'm actually very concerned about these two women.
You're going to tell me that, all right, let's just say you're right, and
Yeah.
getting wet is what you want. Like, right? Okay. Oh, God, that guy sucks.
Oh man, it's well, we should probably move away from this, but what any of the features that you really liked, anything that stood out to you?
Yeah, I think, well, so the Savage remix, been out for a while.
Of
It
course.
is a really good remix.
Yeah.
A good remix, traditional remix, not like a DJ remix. A good remix, kind of uncommon. Doesn't happen all that often. A lot of times, you just kind of throw shit together to boost the streams. It's not really that intentional of like a remix to redo the song. But
Hmm.
Beyonce, I think, really brings a lot to this. There's a bit of harmonization, notable quotables from Beyonce. It's a good remix. I also would say that SZA makes a good impression on Freaky Girls. Always love to hear SZA feature because we don't get them all that often. And I was surprised to like the movie as much as I did with Little Dirk. Little Dirk's hook uh, is pretty simple, pretty repetitive, but for some reason I just find it incredibly catchy. And I think that's really the beat that does it for me.
Hmm.
Um, Crybaby with the Baby, not nearly as memorable for me as a Cash Shit last year between the two of them, but I think for the most part the guests are pretty good.
Yeah, the only one I really wanted to shout out, I do think they all are pretty solid, was SZA. Just nice to hear SZA on a track.
Absolutely.
And the song sounds very much like a SZA song, but not totally like she took it over, which is cool. Yeah, I'm waiting for that follow up album to come out. Is I guess really what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Um, and last thoughts on good news before we close the book on it for this week.
Uh, yeah, man. I mean, I think the only times I was not really into it, like I said before, Don't Rock Me to Sleep, and even Outside a little bit as well. Those two tracks at the end, it's just a different energy that you can tell from this and Sugar that it's something Meg is interested in exploring. But and I'm not trying to cut her off from that. Obviously, Cardi B was able to really branch out with something like I Like It by changing
Hmm.
up the sound. It's not to say that. I think Meg should just keep working at it to figure out how she wants to diversify a little bit. But even if she never diversifies, what she does right now is more than enough.
I guess the last thing I just want to say, shout out to Popcan. I feel like he
Absolutely.
fell off the map, so kind of nice to hear from him.
He actually had a well liked project come out this year.
And we didn't
Uh,
talk about it.
we did not talk about it. It's called the Fix Tape. It came out back in August, and people that are in the know on PopCan said it might have been his best, but we did not talk about that one. So he's
Well,
not off the map totally. Just you got to pay attention, Pat.
he's off my radar, I guess I'll say. Why don't we move on to something that is very much on my radar, which is the new Steve McQueen anthology film series, which is, I guess, dropping on Amazon Prime,
Yeah,
called Small Acts. And
BC in England.
the first episode came out this past weekend on Amazon Prime, and I watched it, Dave. And it's called Mangrove, and it stars Letitia Wright, probably is the most famous person in this, but Sean Parks, Malachi Kirby, Rashonda Sandel, probably some people that aren't so well known, but um, Steve McQueen. Last time, what we really talked about him was Widows.
Yep, 2018.
Great movie, underrated movie,
Underrated, underseen, underappreciated.
probably
Widows is awesome, and it deserved better, frankly.
probably one of my most memorable movie going moments when people when the twist in Widows comes about. Very very memorable.
Mm-hmm.
But check out our review for that. Mangrove, Dave. I mean, this is just awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Really good. Premiered at the New York Film Festival, and they showed, I think, three episodes.
Yep, 3 of the 5.
And it seems like they each have a distinctive feel. But this one, which focused on a story in Notting Hill about police harassing and systemic racism in this small town, to harass this Trinidadian person who is opening his own restaurant, and then the race protest that came from that. Very very captivating film, and Steve McQueen, obviously the first Black man to win the Academy Award for Best Director. Very accomplished filmmaker, tells these sorts of stories really well. I think he was just in total command here, and there's so much to dig into. But I wanted to kind of seed the floor and just kind of get your thoughts before we start breaking down what we really liked or didn't like.
Yeah, just to clarify, it was first Black director to win Best Picture. McQueen didn't actually win Best Director that year, but still, he's clearly a world-class filmmaker. I think everyone knows that by now. And to me, like, just going into Small Acts, I was like, it just in my neurotic brain, I was like, how do I quantify what the hell this is? Because it's called an anthology film series, but then also called a TV series. And I'm like, is this like Black Mirror? Can I just think about it that way, right? But it premiered, as you said, at New York Film Festival. Film, emphasis on the film there. And it's going week to week. For what we know, like half of this run are feature-length films for the most part, but not all of them are. I guess I'm going to think of it as a TV series, but it's really a series of movies, I guess. Mm-hmm. Either way, doesn't really matter doesn't really matter because the work is the work. And going into this, I was actually going to Mangrove specifically. I was most interested to see Malachi Kirby, because Malachi Kirby, actually, you have seen him before. Black Mirror season 3, Men Against Fire episode. That's the first season that Netflix made. Men Against Fire, not one of the most well liked ones. He plays like this future military man who's killing people, and then he finds out that what he's seeing he's killing civilians and stuff. Kind of a mediocre concept for Black Mirror standards, but Kirby was the lead there. And the reason I wanted to see more of him was because he hasn't done much since that. But I remember seeing a John Boyega interview, and John Boyega is in the 3rd episode of Small Acts. And Boyega cited Kirby as one of those one of his peers as a young talented Black actor from England. And I'm like, I should really keep an eye out for Malachi Kirby. And sure enough, he gets cast in the Steve McQueen project. I think that's a good enough co-sign as any. And he really stood out to me. In this for sure. And then, of course, his fellow Black Mirror alum, Letitia Wright, is great as well. But it's hard not to think about Mangrove without also thinking about something we talked about recently, which would be the trial of the Chicago 7. Very similar subject matter. The real life events are taking place only a year and a half, 2 years apart, albeit on different continents. And Steve McQueen's treatment of the material and his attitudes and the way he what he focuses on is quite different, of course, from what we expect from Aaron Sorkin. So they are quite the companion piece, I would say.
Yeah. Um, I I think when I was left sitting with this film pretty much the whole rest of the day after I watched it, and I think what I was really most taken by in this movie is how McQueen does such a wonderful and really like he's really in command of his ability to develop these relationships and really like make you get the sense of what this place was, what it felt like to live there if you were a black person living there. And he does it in a way where the first half of the film is super engaging and fun. You just kind of want to live in this world and party with these people and dance around and play the steel drums. And then it so quickly becomes a totally brilliant uh, courtroom drama, which is just super enthralling. And it's just like two very distinct movies that seamlessly transition together and build out to be, I think, larger than the sum of their parts in a lot of ways. You know,
Mhm.
the messages and all the different topics of racism and uh, it was just really really well done. And you're totally right. I actually found myself afterwards like sometimes calling it like the trial of Mangrove or something like that because
Yeah,
it
the Mangrove
feels
Nine, I think, is what
yeah
they're called.
yeah it feels so much like the trial of the Chicago Seven, especially even how they're like using like the newspapers and stuff to
Mhm.
um real and just like the media stuff to like acknowledge these pieces. It's very interesting. You mentioned Malachi Kirby. I thought obviously playing Darkus, he had probably one of the meatiest roles. Darkus representing himself in court, really pushing forward the movement and keeping in mind of identifying the systemic racism going on is kind of the point of this whole thing, at least for him. uh, I really like Letitia Wright as well, but the actor that played the restaurant keeper,
Yeah. What's his
Sean
name?
Parks,
Yeah,
I thought he was brilliant as
yeah,
well.
definitely.
I thought he had one of the most interesting roles as he kind of like teetered on this like reluctant leader, kind of just wanting to be a restaurant owner type person, wanting to create this
Right.
community, but also being a protector. I felt like he had a very fine line to walk, and I thought he did it brilliantly. How did you feel about his performance?
Yeah, no, I think he's really good, right? Because he demonstrates like that pain and that rage from
Hmm.
a different perspective, right? Letitia
Yeah.
Wright's character is a Black Panther. She
Hmm.
is a young, educated, politically minded person. It's a different perspective, right? And you see how this guy running a restaurant, he's going to have a different perspective on this. And apparently, they don't actually like spend too much time talking about. I think it was the Rio, like a previous establishment that had other run-ins with the police, right? But like you can tell, he he's just kind of losing his grip, right, as the
Hmm.
police continue to harass them. And I think, and credit to McQueen because the way he builds everything up in Mangrove, which again, it's a 2 hour movie, right? The
Hmm.
way he builds everything up is there's just a sense of dread and devastation in the beginning. And I think when you get that like probably this, I think it's the second police raid, the long one where it ends with like a kitchen bowl spinning on the ground for an extended period of time, and you just like like honestly it kind of like made me tear up a little bit because I thought like it's just it really effectively, I think, communicates just the systemic issues at the heart of this real life story, right?
Yeah.
And then we transition to, I think, something that's a little more conventional, which is that courtroom stuff. Not a whole lot different than what we got from Sorkin. I think the speeches, you still kind of get some speechifying, right?
Hmm.
And you have a notable judge once again. Um,
Hmm.
but I think McQueen, he has a certain tact as a filmmaker, and he never lets it get hokey or preachy, right?
Yeah.
And I think at the end, right when they get the not guilty verdict, and the camera the whole time it's focusing on
The
the
black
faces of
juror.
defendants, right? We're not getting Joseph Gordon-Levitt being portrayed as the kind of good bad guy, right? It's
Hmm.
like there's just a different frame of reference, I think, going in. And like I said, definitely a good companion piece. I think Mangrove, uh, it's just operating at a higher level than Chicago 7, but they're also trying to do different things. Chicago 7's more idealistic,
Hmm.
has Sorkin's politics a little more open, but Mangrove, I think if I think it's very instructive, and you know, as an ignorant American, piece of history that I was not aware of at all. So definitely happy it exists.
Yeah, I think one of the things McQueen does, and when you think about his filmography and the types of stories he tells, is he really considers the perspective of the person and how their history affects that. I'm forgetting the name of the one, but the mother, right, the one who had been orphaned as a child,
Mhm.
and was worried about if her and her husband went to jail, what would happen to their young son. I think it's Darkus's wife, which
Yep.
is a
Yes.
bit reductive to say, but I'm blanking on the name at the moment. Um, I really liked how he brought in her perspective into this, and sometimes it felt a little bit forced. Like it felt like that was just kind of like roped in at times. But I think the larger message is that these were nine individuals who were facing the same or similar charges for being part of the same event, who all lead completely different lives, but are lumped in together based on the color of their skin, right? And it does that. I think it tells that so effectively by the way it builds out who each of, they really highlight, I think, four or five of them to like build out their background. But I think it so effectively just kind of captures how when you're within this system of racism, you can be a light skinned black person who's well educated and has this Black Panther background where they're kind of helping to like make these issues known, or you could be the shopkeeper who's just kind of thrust into being this community leader who might not have as much education that but has that lived experience, and
Yeah.
you're all the same within that system.
I also quite liked Jack Loudon's presence as the lawyer who's helping them, kind of
Yeah.
playing this like precocious young attorney. And it's notable. I think he's it's a small role, but he always seems to jump in at the right time, and like the smirk he gives at times when he's trying to needle the judge seems to be effective. But at the end of the day, they don't let him be like the savior of the nine. It's the grandstanding you get from Letitia Wright and Malachi Kirby's characters at the end of the day is what uh,
Mhm.
probably secures their not guilty verdict. Right, the fact that they represented themselves and were able to use their intelligence to point out the you know the errors in the case, pretty obviously, right?
Mhm.
But I liked Loudon. He's had a bit. He has had small roles from time to time. He's in Capone, for example,
Yep.
this year. But I thought he was pretty good.
That when they first open the trial and he's like trying to say that the jurors should be all black, and I forgot what it was. I think the judge says something like, well, let's not make this a race thing, and he like sits back down and he like acts like he's all pissed, but then he starts to smile. Like I thought that
Yeah,
was such a brilliant like piece of acting from him, because it obviously like kind of gets across the point of this is what they were trying to do, knowing it would fail, but just having it said made a difference.
yeah.
I don't know. There were a lot of really. It was a nicely done movie. A lot of special touches on it. Any last thoughts? We're gonna keep up with this, so
Yeah,
we'll keep
we're gonna
talking about it.
since they're all for the most part near feature length, if not feature length. We'll do this every week. Next week we have Lovers Rock, also screened near film festival, also critically acclaimed. Has already aired in the BBC. England's a week ahead of us with this. And Lovers Rock's only an hour and 8 minutes. Probably, I think it's actually one of the shorter ones. The week 3 is an hour 20, the Boyega episode. But Lovers Rock apparently is very great as well. So happy to keep it going with small acts. And I would say Netflix, do this with Black Mirror. Let's
Yeah,
spread it out, man. Because when you have this stuff that I think is this dense because it's longer and it's an anthology thing, it's a brand new thing every week. Spread it out. It works better.
it sits with you more for sure. All right, Dave. Let's just say that we had a movie on Hulu and it had the name of a Joji song, but it didn't actually use the Joji song. Would you consider that a complete failure or just somewhat of a failure?
It is absolutely a missed opportunity. I'm really sick of saying this, but there's an amazing song called Run. If your thing is called Run and the activity of running is happening in your thing, use the song, please.
Just use it. But yeah, Run, the most recent movie from Anish Chaganty on Hulu.
Chaganti.
Chaganty. starring Sarah Paulson, um, and Kira Allen.
Yep.
Pretty
Her
much,
film debut.
it's pretty much just those two for like 85% of the movie, I'd say.
Mhm.
Uh, and I just gotta say, I'm tired of Sarah Paulson playing these weirdos. Like, it was such a breath of fresh air of her, in Mrs. America,
Sure.
or Miss America, playing
Just
this.
being a conservative wife.
Yeah, but
That's what really
also
does it
like,
for you.
but the episode where she takes the drugs and she kind of becomes enlightened to like how maybe a more liberal perspective isn't like the worst thing ever. Um, was really good and really fun. And Sarah Paulson got to not be like a super duper weirdo, and now she's just back to being that nurse on Netflix,
Ratchet.
which we're not going to go back to.
Nope.
She's playing this person in Run. She's basically just like her American Horror Story
Yeah.
characters all over again,
Sure.
and she's really good at it. But
Mm.
I'm just tired of her playing this. I want her to play something a little more lighter.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely familiar. I think it's a good performance because early on, it's quite understated. Like she
Hmm.
doesn't like become more manic toward the end, but she's good at doing that stuff too.
Hmm.
So it is a good performance. But I understand that sentiment. Like you almost have this preconceived notion going in. Jason Clarke, he's gonna get cut. Sarah Paulson, she's gonna uh, be off her rocker at some point. This is what you expect. I understand that. Happy to see this movie. I think it's a very effective thriller film, though. It makes it 2 for 2 for Anish Chaganty. I really liked what he did with Searching back in 2018. Really, I think innovative movie, but he was smart to not pigeonhole himself by doing another film that has a gimmick of some kind, runs a more conventional thriller film, but still reined in the way Searching was. This time, it's because our lead character is in a wheelchair, so everything is going to be like smaller scale, and the struggles, the conflicts are almost slowed down. Like it's different perspective, right? And I think it's notable that Kira Allen is someone who is in a wheelchair in real life. I think that's a great piece of casting. I think she did a really good job for debut role. But
Yep.
yeah, I like it because like there's a lot of suspense with this, but it's all in the daylight, And like I
Hmm.
said, because it's reined in small due to the constraints from the story, uh, it's not the most innovative thriller I've ever seen, but I like the energy it had.
Yeah. I think maybe I didn't like it as much as you. I think it definitely was good at being suspenseful, and kind of filling you with that feeling of dread. But I think where maybe I'm just tired of like this sort of story. I feel like there's been a lot of this. There was a series we didn't talk about. God, I'm forgetting the name of it. This was called like Mother or something like that, that came out this past year, about a very
Oh,
famous story about this.
oh yeah, what was that?
Yeah, forgetting. It was also on Hulu, I
The
believe, which is kind
Vow.
of
What was
funny.
it?
It was something like that. And there was a movie made about
No,
this
not the
on
Vow.
on HBO a couple of years
Hmm.
ago. Um, it's just a type of story that I think gets told over and over. And this is a little bit more of like a suspense horror take on it. Like the Get Out type mode. Um, and I think the moments I liked the most were almost kind of like the ones where she was like figuring things out in a way, like the scene where she's trapped in her room and she crawls across uh, the roof and uses the electrical current in that pen to break the glass when she spits the water on it. Like that was really cool, really well done. Um, but there were just other parts where I was like, some of this doesn't add up, some of this doesn't make sense. Like
Hmm.
in the hospital when the nurse is talking to her, and they have like code blue and everybody has to respond. I was like, there's no way that nurse would just like leave. Like, there's got to be
Sure.
other nurses that could respond to this. Also, like, no one sees this girl like looking terrified and is like, oh yeah, maybe we shouldn't stop them and see what's going on. Just that whole part, and like the kind of like the last half didn't really
Yeah,
jive with me too
I
well.
definitely like the beginning more than the end for sure. I think the build up to the suspense,
Hmm.
like when she gets on the computer at night and then it
Hmm.
ends, you just see Sarah Paulson sitting at the
Yeah,
table like a jump scare. Really, the only jump scare the movie has. I was like, oh, that was good. That was well done.
that was a really great shot.
and like you're not expecting the jump scare because that's not the way the movie is like telling its story. So
Hmm.
and that's well done for sure. Yeah, you're thinking of it wasn't The Vow, it's The Act with
The
Joey
act.
King and Patricia Arquette, which was based off a real life story about a
Yep.
mother like making her kid sick to take
Munchausen's.
advantage of it and
Hmm.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, and that was also the same story that was portrayed in the HBO movie, if I'm remembering correctly. So it's, this sort of thing has been told, and I do like the take and the attempt. I just don't know if this is the type of movie I would normally want to watch. Definitely smaller scale though, which I liked. Just kind of being within the house and getting out like once or twice. Um, yeah. Also, like the time period was very confusing to me because this girl, I guess, because she had never been really socialized, just didn't realize that most people have like phones and can use the internet anytime they want. Just reading books all day. I guess
yeah. So
crazy.
she didn't have any internet access, right? She didn't have a personal computer or a smartphone, and they made it clear that like the surrounding area in the house had no service, so the mailman couldn't use his phone, right? But you're right.
Yeah.
When she leaves the movie theater, she could have just tried to do some googling, I guess, with someone else's phone. You're right, but I guess she
Yeah.
didn't. She didn't know to think of
I
it.
don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I guess there's some logical gaps, but to me, it never felt too ham-fisted.
Hmm. Yeah, it's kind of it's a bit of a forgettable movie for me, but I think like you said, like Searching, we really liked a lot, and Run, it's in the middle for me for this year. Probably like a 3 stars on Letterboxd or
Sure.
something like that, maybe 2.5.
This is a notable film because Lionsgate sold it to Hulu. This would have had a theatrical release, but that was abandoned due to COVID, obviously. And also, when you saw those pills, those green pills that trying to figure out what they are the whole time, did you immediately think of the tranquilizers from Queen's Gambit? Because that's what I
Hmm. Yep, that was my first thought too.
did.
Yeah, but they turned out to be for dogs, or animals.
Yeah,
Um,
similar.
Interesting. Anyways, any last thoughts, or should we wrap up and decide what we're going to talk about next
That's
week?
all good, man.
Okay, go for it. What should we talk about next week?
We got the end of The Undoing, the end of Fargo season 4, new Miley Cyrus album, as well as Lovers Rock and Small Axe, episode 2, which we mentioned before. And then Hillbilly Elegy on Netflix, the Glenn Close, Amy Adams movie that's apparently a disaster and not the Oscar hopeful everyone thought it was a few months ago. So we gotta know what that's about. And also, speaking of like holiday movies and rom coms, we have Happiest Season on Hulu with Kristen Stewart and I believe Mackenzie Davis as well. Yes, Mackenzie Davis and
A
Dan Levy.
lot to talk about.
Yeah, plenty of good stuff there for sure.
Yeah, I had to catch up on TV this week.
There it goes. We're basically done with new TV though for the year. There's nothing else on the docket till I think WandaVision in middle January. So
Hell yeah.
time to catch up on stuff and think about lists already. Jesus Christ.
List time. Yeah, it's December next week, and we'll be
Can't believe
here.
it.
So give us that subscribe on youtube.com/nostalgiapod, soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod to listen to the podcast any way you want to, and go to Twitter at nostalgiapod there too, and Davis at Martin Swagger. Don't follow me. We'll catch you next week.